Parsons will talk to us about the virtual meetings.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, for the past 15 months, we've been operating under an emergency declaration by the governor's office. We've allowed all of the boards and committees of the TPO to meet virtually. That emergency declaration was lifted at the end of June, but effective July 1, the city of Richmond put in place their own emergency declaration to extend disability for the TPO until December 31st. So this will allow, the city did it because it will allow them time to get their ducks in a row in terms of how meetings should be functioning and just give some more breathing room to figure out how to do things like a hybrid meeting, what we're doing today. So we have the ability to continue with virtual participation if that is the choice through the end of this calendar year. So we'll basically what we've done for the past year will continue.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank those on staff, Chet and Nicole, and also our former chairman, Bob Basham, for all of their hard work throughout the last year and a half in terms of during the pandemic. Made it look fairly easy. I'm sure it wasn't, but we were able to continue through Zoom, which I think a lot of us are continuing to do. But it's really nice to be back and see some people, our friends that we haven't seen for a while. It's nice to be in the company again, and welcome those who are out there using your electronic devices. But I encourage you to come and attend in person if you're able to. Nicole, if you'll do a roll call, please, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I will start with Town of Ashland, Chair Martin.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Fields. I believe she's joining us virtually. Mr. Richmond.
Yeah.
Ms. Borden. Buchanan County, Mr. Basham. Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick. Henrico County, Ms. Lancaster. Kent County, Vice Chair Guthrie.
Here.
Mr. Moyer. Powhatan County, Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Ms. Erickson. Mr. Barnhart. Mr. Hill. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter. Mr. Naaman. National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Mr. Minor. Mr. Johnson. League of Women Voters, Ms. Coles. Ms. Crutchfield. Richmond Area Bicycling Association, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, Mr. Testament.
Present.
Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Borden.
Present.
Mr. Fisher. And VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next on our agenda is consideration of amendments to the meeting agenda. Does anyone have any additions to our agenda for our meeting today? Yes, Ms. Cole.
I have a question. What is it? There's two comment periods. You know, this is other business, the other business. There's CTAC announcements and open comment. And then there are future meeting topics, and then there's CTAC member comments, and I don't understand what the difference is.
Ms. Cole, I'll have to have my staff help us with that. Either one.
I think you're correct, Ms. Wolf. We probably eliminate one of those items from
the other business.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You are correct. I think we could eliminate one of those two items under other business, and we will do so.
I think so too, but let's give us 10 minutes for comments.
Yes. And we can allow more time for comments. Under one of them.
We can depend upon you doing that.
An English teacher background is hard to beat.
That's right.
Any other consideration of changes to our agenda? All in favor of our agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. You have included in your material are the minutes for the May 20th CTAC meeting. Are there any additions or deletions from the minutes? Hearing none, I assume that we approve it. Is there, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And the meeting minutes are for the May 20th are approved. The next item is open public comment. Nicole, are there any comments, public comments out
No,
there?
sir, we have our discipline comments prior to the meeting.
Seeing no one here, I close the period for open comments. Moving on to my chairman's report on 4. Page 7, starting on page 7 on your agenda, is a listing of the members of the CTAC committee. And a glaring issue is that many of us, including myself, do not have an alternate listed or been there. I would encourage all of us to seek out an alternate. What I attempted to do once was bring my alternate with him so we could meet people around the table, get an understanding of the meeting agenda, et cetera. I guess that must have scared him away to see if he would come out. But anyhow, moving on, if you can address that, would greatly appreciate it. One other thing, and since we talked about members, there was a lengthy discussion about a year and a half ago about the EDAC committee, the fact that the EDAC committee was dissolved. But we talked about the fact that there were many issues that come up involving that concern. And this year, we'd like to find some way that we can move forward with adding perhaps membership or people who would have fallen into the EDAC characteristics and fold them into our active committee. That may take bylaw changes from the top TPO because they actually have the bylaws for us. But we'll be discussing that. I'm going to look at doing that, not at this meeting, but at a subcommittee, a small committee that will study that and bring it to our committee. So we don't have to discuss that. Okay. Moving on, RRTPO updates, Mr. Parsons, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If you can refer to page 9 in your agenda package, there's a memorandum there detailing proceedings of both the technical committee as well as the policy board for a handful of different meetings. I wanted to highlight a few things. At the June 3rd policy board meeting, the FY22 Unified Planning Work Program was adopted. And this is basically our charge as staff and sets forth what we will be working on for the next 12 months. It includes major items like finalizing the long-range transportation plan, Connect RDA 2025. That will be back to the policy board for action in October. We also are going to be embarking on a scenario planning process and project, which will be a multi-year effort that hasn't been done in the Richmond region, as far as I know. And it will take the outcomes of our long-range transportation plan, as well as many other factors like the environment and housing and other things, and assess how they all relate and what we can do, what we can expect in the future, and how we can start to address those things comprehensively. So we're very excited about this opportunity, and it's going to be, as I said, a multi-year process. So there'll be a huge education component, and that's something that I think we'll be looking to this committee extensively for, to help move this discussion out into the community and across the region.
Check question on that. Are you planning on using some type of commercial planning tool to do that, or use building scenarios yourselves, or how do you, tell us just a little about that process, please?
We plan on soliciting consultant help for this project because there are firms across the country that have done this very well in places. And we want to learn as a staff, just like anybody else, how best to do it. So I think that's the first step, is to get somebody on contract. And then I would imagine that we would use some type of a commercial platform to help set up the model. It may be modified or customized just for us, but I think that's the sort of.
I'm wondering if a federal transportation investment package passes anytime in the near term, how does that money trickle down to this level? Is that too big a question to ask? I mean, that money is not planned for in our long range plan right now. So, I mean, there would be new funding available for things. How does this group do?
Well, that's a good question. I think it depends on how the bill is divided and where the priorities are. But we could see, I mean, we could see additional planning money, which would directly impact the TPO in terms of the work that it does. But we could also see, I mean, you would expect additional funds or increases in funding through different programs like rail or transit or highways or other types of investments. I think we would certainly be tracking that along with our partners at the chamber and other organizations in town to figure out, one, when money would be available, and two, how. So, but I think that's something that would roll into our estimates and our modeling and the long range plan itself. So my hope is that even though we have an October date that the plan has to be adopted, we'll be doing multiple amendments and modifications to the plan over the next few years so that we can account for additional funds or completion of projects, hopefully, and adjust the plan accordingly and keep it dynamic.
We have a constrained budget as projects, and could I naively assume that perhaps we call those shovel-ready projects that could be awaiting.
I would think so. There's different levels of shovel ready. For the long range plan, they're typically not shovel ready, but there are I would say there are a portion of the projects in the long range plan that are to the point where they're ready for P and right of way and everything else. So there's probably a combination of readiness.
Just don't want us to be caught with money on the table, looking around at each other.
I seem to recall that we talked about perhaps some type of tutorial kind of mini session that we would offer to go over all these various TPO plans, definitions, to help people really grasp, seeing in some type of a graphic depiction of the types of plans from long range, CMAC, what are all these funds, what is the percentage, just understanding more of the framework of transportation funding. Thought we had talked about that at some point. It might be time to really try to talk to that.
I agree. I think that's a great idea, and we'll put that on a future meeting
Okay.
agenda. we wanted to wait until membership was updated.
Yeah.
So I think starting this new fiscal
Okay.
year, this is the right time.
We'd actually talked about perhaps from time to time changing our meeting format. Instead of having presentations, 3 or 4 presentations, we have a workshop where we spend this time talking about funding sources, where they come from, who they come from, what are the criteria. I think we thought that would be of great interest. Virginia had a question.
I was just thinking that maybe we should look at the transportation improvement plan and the 6-year plans for what's shovel ready.
Good idea. We'll put that on our. Thank you. Is that okay? We'll add it to the meeting topics coming up.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a quick follow-up with Lisa's comment, and I know we've talked about this before. The new transportation bill is a big-time moving target, as a lot of people here know. And as soon as that hopefully passes, if we can make that a top priority, 40+ on what finally settles out, because that really is the tail that's going to wag its entire dog, and it can be overwhelming for a non-professional to try to figure out all of the pieces and parts.
Great idea. I would like to say some of these are big enough subjects that we may opt to spend the whole meeting talking about subjects, so that we have enough time to dig into it instead of being rushed. I know your time is valuable. So we want to give justice to the topic and to your time also. Thank you.
This surplus that's reading state law. $2.1 billion. I'd like to see the money spent. Anytime I go up, that is a million, twice a week. 360 Ruby Bridge. 8 months ago, I was going across the by myself. Then now replaced. And I think it's high time for the state. Look at the roads around the Commonwealth of Virginia, replacing bridges. They're getting old. And back years ago, I had to go on the beach show, and I got caught in that home. They came in, water was coming. And that's because of maintenance. I think this group should have first city council supervisor to make sure percentage of this money pressure put upon the government. Pressure this money to go for roads improvement. This year, I have never seen the grass grow as high as Chesterfield County on the roads. That we paid the state to do it, and then it's not doing it.
Interestingly enough, Robert, scheduled on our future meeting topics for November the 18th, regional structure bridge inventory.
But the problem is that money will be gone.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Jeff?
Just a couple other highlights. I mean, everything was in your agenda packet, so please let us know if you have other questions. But we do have a couple CBTA highlights that I wanted to bring to you. The CBTA in, I believe in June, June 25th, they approved the FY22 Regional Public Transportation Plan that GRTC has developed. That was one of the 2 major components that the CBTA was responsible for that was actually listed in the legislation establishing the authority. And then at their meeting tomorrow, the authority is going to consider the regional transit service governance report, which is the second of the 2 things that the legislation spelled out. So things are getting done. We're still not all the way through the first year of the authority, but everything is moving forward fairly smoothly. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you as well as staff that has supported everything that's been going on and your patience with us as we try and make sure everything is checked off and understood. In the interest of time, I think we could move on unless there's any other questions about it.
Any questions online? Nicole?
No,
Okay. thank you. Those of you online, you need to raise your hand will be called on, or I think you've got chat box that you can type in, and Nicole will ask what your questions are. Thank you. Moving on, new business. We have a presentation by Rebecca Cazares on disability inclusive transportation assessment of first/last mile conditions in the Richmond region. We've all talked about this a lot. Can't get to the GRTC or the trains. It's a real issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Cazares, and I'm very excited to be here today to share with you my disability inclusive transportation plan. Currently, I'm working full-time here at Plan RBA in the environment program. In May, I graduated from VCU with a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning degree. And in my last year of the program, I developed this plan as a requirement for my degree. I worked closely with Ken Lance as well as Chet with Plan RBA as my client. And I actually presented to the CTAC back in September virtually about my plan proposal. So I'm excited to share the final product with you all today. So the purpose of my plan is to contribute to the agency's existing and future transportation-related products to increase access to public transportation services in the Richmond region for individuals with disabilities. So as we all know, it's extremely important for all people, regardless of ability level, as we all know, it's important for all people, regardless of ability level, to safely and efficiently access public transportation services so we can promote equal access to opportunities and a high quality of life in the region. However, there are barriers in the built environment that often cause increased hardships for people with disabilities while attempting to access transportation services. And it's extremely important that we address these barriers so that they can access essential services, secure employment, participate in their communities, and further advocate for their rights. So the first part of my plan, I wanted to set a clear definition of disability as it relates to this plan. And given my plan aims to make recommendations to the built environment, I chose to focus on individuals with physical impairments. And I also referred to the Americans with Disability Act's definition that says a physical impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So my plan focused on the first mile, last mile approach. And this approach recognizes that an individual's trip is more than just getting on and off the bus. It's the entire trip from origin to destination. And so I focused on the first mile and the last mile of an individual's trip and what barriers are present there. So a few of the barriers that I'd like to talk about today are on this screen. So first we see inaccessible sidewalks. And in this picture, we see the loose cobblestones on the sidewalk. And for someone with a physical impairment, someone who uses a wheelchair, this will be extremely hard and dangerous to use, potentially forcing them to use the street, which also poses a lot of life-threatening concerns. We also have unsafe crossing areas. And in this picture specifically, we see it's kind of might be hard for you to see around the table, but we see a sidewalk that is disconnected due to a lack of curb ramps. Curb ramps are extremely important to have across all sidewalks so that someone using a wheelchair or someone with another physical impairment can safely cross to the next sidewalk. We also see a lack of crossing markings on the actual intersection, which is important to clearly designate a crossing area. The third example I'm going to show you today is inadequate bus stops. As we can see at this bus stop, there is a lack of a stable landing surface. That is going to be really important to improve safety and comfortability of people with disabilities as they are accessing the transportation services, as well as a lack of amenities. So that's going to be bus shelters, bus benches, as well as trash cans, and that all contributes to safety. The last aspect of my research is disability inclusive development. So disability inclusive development consists of two main strategies, and that is including the perspectives and rights of people with disabilities in all development activities, while at the same time empowering people with disabilities through disability-specific projects. So it's important that we are including people with disabilities in all of our decision-making processes. So I want to talk with you about the existing conditions section of my plan for the Richmond region. I wanted to have a clear understanding of the layout of the region, who lives there, and the existing services and organizations. And I know we are all very aware of the region and of the 9 localities, over 1 million residents, and 11.6% of all residents are living with some form of disability, and that number is growing each year. Currently, the region's transportation services and organizations are working towards better connecting residents and visitors so they can benefit from all the region has to offer. I'll just briefly go over the GRTC because I know living in the region, we have an understanding of these services, but I wanted to highlight specifically the care and care on demand services. These are paratransit services that offer curb to curb and door to door services by trained employees. However, they don't extend to the entire region. So that's an important aspect that we want to know. So we want to fill in those gaps. There are mobility coordination efforts currently happening in the region to fill in those gaps, such as Senior Connects, Access Chesterfield, and Senior Rides, just to name a few. And I did collect all of those services within the region, had them in a table just so I could pinpoint any gaps in services, as well as highlighting the existing efforts. I wanted to make sure anyone reading the document was aware of the RRTPO and the CBTA. I do think that this is a really exciting time for me to develop this planning document, given the current updates to the Long Range Transportation Plan Connect RBA 2045, as well as the newly created Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Lastly, I want to offer a quick snapshot of the region's existing disability demographics. I want to note first that this plan provides data that reflects disability as a whole. Disaggregated data that reflects only individuals with physical impairments was not available to me. And so looking at the data in 2017, as I mentioned previously, 11.6% of all the Richmond region's residents living with some form of disability. And those localities with the highest representation include Charles City with 16.5%, Richmond City with 15.5%, and Goochland with 11.6%. So all of this information that I just spoke about helped inform my research questions and approach. And I'd like to go over that with you. So my approach was separated into 3 main steps that built upon each other. The first being a high-level regional approach with a regional analysis and ranked scoring process. And that's followed by a more in-depth local approach with my case study. So first, I wanted to understand the region, who's in the region, what that looks like, and where there's a high concentration of people with disabilities, as well as other transportation disadvantaged groups. And then I took that information to do a deeper dive into a specific census tract that was deemed most in need of assessment. So the first aspect of my methodology was the regional analysis. I collected demographic data for the 6 criteria points that you see here on the left, that being people with disabilities, people age 65 and up, people living in poverty, race, households with no car, and utilizing public transportation. And all of these were, through my literature review, important factors that either further disability. So, as I collected that data and I presented it in different tables and maps, I did start to see specific trends. I'm sure we would not be surprised that the three localities with the largest population size, Richmond City, Henrico, and Chesterfield, revealed the highest total population findings across all six criteria points. However, while localities such as Charles City, Goochland, and Powhatan revealed smaller total population findings, they had a much higher percent population totals. And I thought that was very important to investigate. These smaller localities have a large portion of residents aged 65 and up, as well as individuals living with a disability. And because a lot of these residents are hoping to age in place, this reinforces the need for accessible and connected transportation systems so people can live independently and safely. The second part of my methodology is the ranked scoring process. So I used all of that data collected for the regional analysis, and I developed a ranked scoring system to determine a census tract deemed most in need of assessment of first mile, last mile conditions. And to do this, I ranked all 240 tracts based on their population data, both total population as well as percent population. So the tract ranked the lowest meant they had the lowest representation of the 6 criteria points, and they received a score of 0. Those ranked the highest meant they had the highest representation and received a score of 100. So it's on a 100 scale just for it to be easily understood. So those tracts with the highest scores revealed locations that are most in need of assessment, so we can accommodate the needs of community members. And while I did calculate both the total population as well as the percent population, my plan wanted to focus on how can we serve the most total number of citizens in need. And in this map, you can't see specific census tracts, but you can, it's kind of far away, but you can see that a lot of the scores with the highest scores were located in the city of Richmond, as well as in Henrico, and growing increasingly smaller as we move outside of the city center. So the last step in my approach was the case study, and I determined my study area as census tract 202, as it received the highest total population score. So across all of those 6 criteria points, it received the highest score. And this census tract is located in the Creighton Court and Fairfield neighborhood in the city of Richmond, and it is comprised of over 4,500 residents. So the goal of this case study was to assess the existing first mile, last mile conditions within the study area. I wanted to understand what barriers were in place in and at and surrounding designated GRTC bus stops. Specifically, given most people are willing to travel a quarter miles distance to and from bus stops, I assessed surrounding conditions for a well-rounded analysis. And it was my intention to go into the field and collect this data, but given COVID and time constraints, I did collect the data via Google Maps. This posed a few limitations, but altogether, I think it provided a sufficient analysis. And the imagery that you see here and throughout my plan are dated 2019, so I know that they're recent. So as these pictures reveal, and in my planning document, there is a dire need for improvements specifically in this study area. I'll just go over a few of them with you. So in the top left corner, we see a bus shelter, and bus shelters are a very important amenity to have at every bus stop. However, this bus shelter is located within a grassy landing area. So this poses several different unsafe conditions or just increases hardship for someone with a physical limitation. Below that, we see a few pictures of sidewalk conditions, and this was consistent throughout the entire study area. You see a sidewalk with one sidewalk on the left side and then a grassy area on the right. So this is an example of a disconnected sidewalk, making it harder for people to get to and from the bus stops, as well as poorly maintained sidewalks that we see in the bottom left corner. Lack of curb ramps was throughout the entire study area was a lack of curb ramps. So forcing people in a wheelchair or someone with another physical limitation having to walk in the middle of the street. While there were a good amount of bus stop amenities at locations, a lot of the times they acted as barriers themselves because they were placed on the back side of a sidewalk that was too small, not large enough width. So say two people with a wheelchair were trying to go across that sidewalk, that would be almost impossible for them to do. So on the next slide was the next aspect of my case study, which was a connectivity assessment. So this connectivity assessment looked at all residential areas in the study area. And I wanted to understand what % of those residential areas are within a quarter-mile distance of a bus stop to know if that area is being served well. And this study area had 96.2% of all residential areas within a quarter-mile distance. So this is a good thing. This area does have a good amount of bus stops. However, those barriers in place still make it increasingly difficult for someone with a disability to access. So using all this information collected, I developed 3 main goals as well as objectives and actions that I suggest. Goal 1 is to create a built environment free of first mile, last mile barriers. Under this goal, I had 2 objectives. First, to address first mile, last mile barriers in the region's high need areas. So using the first mile, last mile checklist that I developed to evaluate other census tracts, as well as allocating funding or increased funding to make major improvements. And this is a really important objective as the findings really showed how dire the need is for improvements. And the second objective being increasing pedestrian safety. And so we can do that by continuing to promote Vision Zero and advocating for similar initiatives across the region. Goal 2 is to promote connected transportation systems to improve mobility for all people. And we can do that by planning for multimodal transportation systems. We want to prioritize improved walkability and encourage transit-oriented development, as well as extending GRTC bus services to include those underserved but still in need. And our second objective would be to invest in mobility coordination services to improve accessibility for people with disabilities. So, as I noted earlier, was the GRTC services don't extend to the entire region. So we could use a portion of the CVTA funds to enhance these services. And my final goal was to ensure that transportation planning processes are inclusive of the disability community. And this is an extremely important aspect of my plan because we want to make sure that they have a seat at the table and their voices are being heard. And the first objective in this goal is to seek out diverse participation throughout the entire planning process. That includes transportation disadvantaged groups. So we want to include them, but also from the beginning until the end. And we can do that by developing a committee or advisory group to represent the community. And objective 2 is to focus aspects of community outreach efforts to prioritize the needs of people with disabilities. And we can work with localities to promote increased education and awareness surrounding disability, ADA, and ADA transition plans and other aspects of those. And lastly, my last slide is just a quick overview of the implementation timeline that I had. There's 3 main timelines, which would be short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And a lot of those, images that I showed you, those should be really addressed as soon as possible because it is impacting people with disabilities' safety as they travel. and sometimes causing them to avoid traveling altogether. And then ongoing efforts would be the disability inclusive outreach and groups to voice their concerns. And with that, I'll say thank you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes.
I noticed that beginning, very vehicles. I noticed at the city, the bus company has free for a while, right?
Sorry,
The bus company is free for people to ride.
yes.
How about these vans, if they pick up the people with disabilities, are they free?
So I am actually not 100% sure. I'd have to look into that. I didn't cover the COVID aspect specifically in my plan document, but that is a good question. And I know that those services are relatively affordable. They make sure it's affordable for people.
The reason I asked that question is because one person could do it all.
Of course, I agree. And I would be surprised if that was not the case, but I'm not 100% sure.
I have to check, verify, air services. You know,
I don't know. I don't know if, I think they're still charging for that, but
Stand right here. Someone else asked me the same question too, and they had a disability, and I was talking about the buses not being charged. But and for the transit, I don't know if they changed it or not, but you still had to pay them. But he was working
Oh,
out
you're
there.
talking about the care and care.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know.
Like out of curiosity, did you do an overlay on this with the crash data for pedestrians in particular? Phil, I think you ran that analysis. I know Amy George had that. Did you look at where they occur? I want to follow up.
I did not. I realized as I was developing this and going through it, there's so many different avenues that you could do go down, and it becomes very complex. So I really had to narrow my focus in on these specific aspects, but that would be a very interesting overlay and something that I could consider in the future.
Well, it is a follow-up to that, and I would hope we would make this a priority for the region. I mean, obviously, the universe of potential projects is infinite, or virtually. But the example always comes to mind for me is if you look where the crashes have been, where the gravity points are to attract people. In the case that breaks my heart is St. Joseph's Villa up in Henrico. I want to say there were 3 fatalities there because people from St. Joseph's couldn't safely get across the street to a Walmart, and it took years for that to be done. And if we could prioritize where the demand points are, where there's a history, and start there and develop a regional list of priority projects. I would love to see that.
Absolutely. That's a really great idea. And I was reading, Richmond is one of the top areas of pedestrian fatalities. And I know that the elderly community is pretty high up there as well. So.
question, did you include in your overview of the new Hanover service, on-demand service, or in New Kent, the Bay Transit service? Did you include them in your assessment?
Yeah, so I actually referred to the DRPT's table to collect all those different services. So in my plan document, which is available online, I can send that out, is a more extensive list of those services.
I think this is a great support to our request to the TPO to include in their bylaw change to not only include it in the CTAC, but also, maybe having a component in the TPO.
It's interesting
governing
how
board
that-
itself.
that dovetails in
Yeah.
with our earlier comments.
Yeah, at the hearing some years ago, there were the point of discussion was shutting down some train bus lines in Richmond. And some of the people that were represented, those with handicaps, it was obvious from what they were saying that they definitely preferred fixed route transit service to things like
Paratransit. The paratransit.
Yes, it gives them more freedom, more independence, more flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, it might get them to where they need to be quicker.
But they definitely need, oh, and what was it? It was in a RVA rapid transit hall. They said, why do they call these amenities? They are necessities.
They are, you're absolutely right. Now, it's actually one of my coworkers that mentioned that. I think that's a really great point.
We do have one question online. Oh,
There's a comment, Rebecca, from Kelly. She's joining us from the city of Richmond, and she said it would also be helpful to include sidewalk condition data to capture these barriers to access with mobility.
Absolutely. And I think that's where ADA transition plans come into play, because they take a more, a deeper dive in collecting that data at the local level.
and thank you, Kelly, for joining us. John?
Yeah, there's I think last year I was on a panel for the level 2 review of the region transit plan. And many of the recommendations you've been making were recommendations that came out of that plan. And I saw a lot of similar criteria used to identify and program short, mid, and long-term improvements. And many of the fixes that you were suggesting overlay with that. So again, this document reinforces what other groups are already working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing I want to note is that when I shared this document with friends and family, able-bodied individuals, they were just amazed. Like they were not aware of these things, because when you're able-bodied, you don't have to experience them every day. So just getting that awareness out is a big step.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great study.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I hope the next thing is solutions. And I'm afraid that takes money. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the staff. Next, we have a visual tour of VDOT Richmond District Traffic Operations Center. Ed, are you prepared to do that for us?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, this is
Yes.
Ed Correa.
All right, that is awesome. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and I will go through some slides. Thank you for inviting me here. Pleased to be able to talk about our new Joint Safety Operations Center. And I'm just trying to get this thing set up, and it should be sharing now. So I am Ed Correa. I am the Traffic Operations Center Manager for VDOT Central Region. We manage the state maintained roadways in the central region of Virginia, and that is 26 counties and all the state maintained roadways there within and interstate systems. And we recently moved into this building on this first slide, which is in Colonial Heights, and it is quite a remarkable building. And I'll just go over some, I think I have 14 or 15 slides here. We'll just go through them, and if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'll certainly do the research and feed it back through so that we can get anything answered. A little background. This is the building that we were in. This is the old Petersburg Turnpike Authority building on West 100 at Interstate 95. And this is the Richmond District Training Center. This was basically training rooms, a couple conference rooms, and the Transportation Operations Center was this wing of the building on the right. This is a picture inside the room, 6 workstations and a supervisor station. And this was established, this TOC was established in 1999. The building itself dates back to, I believe, the mid-50s. So this is kind of the before. If you drive past that location now, it's actually a pile of rubble and sitting on a slab. That building was taken down over the last month. So this is kind of the timeline for this project. In June 2016, RFP was issued for the project. HGA was awarded that. And so that was the kind of the design of the entire project. The contractor for the actual build, that wasn't just a simple RFP. They actually did a RFQ first, which is a request for qualification. The VDOT only wanted qualified companies to bid on this project. So there was, I think it was 12 companies bid. 4 passed the RFQ part of it. And then it went to the low bid in 2018, February of 2018. KBS was awarded that contract. And then you see the picture there, that was April in 2018, and that was our groundbreaking ceremony. And I'm also the manager for the Safety Service Patrol program in Central Virginia, and that's our safety service truck in the background. Always want to highlight those guys and gals. And we'll go to the next slide. So here are some of the design basics. And this is a 3-story structure. It's about 85,000 square feet. The structure needed to fit on the existing VDOT property. And then it had to be able to withstand the Category 3 rating for weather events. There had to be a physical separation between the state police and VDOT. And one of the slides, we look at the actual building and we'll be able to see that separation. Needed to have a state-of-the-art operations center with data center and inspire innovation and collaboration and pay homage to the achievements of civil engineering. And these pictures, that as we go through them, they're nice pictures, but actually a site tour, really you can appreciate this structure and the facility in general. There were some other challenges, as you might expect. This was a Richmond district, was on the site and still is, and business was still being conducted. And on the other side of the railroad tracks is the district complex, which has a large maintenance facility and some other pavement markings and other entities exist over there. There needed to be some fiber optic connections to I-95, and there had to be 2 private easements and 1 railroad agreement. That was Altria and Philip Morris for us to run fiber to the existing fiber that's on I-95. There is also a tower for Virginia State Police radio system. And the design had to kind of incorporate some of the existing buildings that are on the property. And then, as always, you might expect that funding would be a challenge for something like this project. So this is a kind of a rendition of the before and the after. On the left side, this is basically a stand of trees. You can see the railroad tracks that run adjacent. They actually cuts the property in half. Over on the right side of the property, on this side of the tracks, is the district maintenance facility. These structures, these 5 structures, they all had to come down. This was a brick building, this was a brick building, and these were trailered structures that had been there for quite some time. So those had to be taken down, and those folks actually had to be relocated because those were all structures that business was being conducted. And this is the existing district headquarters. And this looks like it's 3 buildings. They're all actually connected. It's actually one large building, and we'll see that in a picture in a couple minutes. And then this is the new footprint. A lot of additional parking, 2 entrances, a VDOT entrance and a state police entrance, and a large courtyard kind of between all the buildings, which is really a nice change, nice place to get to. So this is view as the slide illustrates. It's from the southeast corner. This is looking from Pine Forest Road. And you can see this one structure here. That's the existing, the old district headquarters. And this is the new one. You can kind of see how the brick is very similar. And then the large 3-story building that was put kind of in back of it. This is once again from the southwest corner on Pine Forest. This is the state police public entrance. And once again, this is the existing district building. So this is well into the project. This is one of the existing buildings that has yet to come down, and some of the other buildings have already been taken down. The one existing brick building is actually right here. So pretty extensive project. This one floor section of the building is the Virginia State Police. The main entrance to the building is actually here, and when you come in, there's a main lobby area, and the Virginia State Police access point is through the lobby, and it's all badge access. Unless you have access, you have to go through the security guard to call a VSP representative to come get you, that kind of stuff. So that's the segregation, the separation between the Virginia State Police, District 1, and VDOT, that physical separation. And the company that was doing the build, they did every month or two, they would put a drone out to get some pictures. This is a little bit further into the build, and there you can kind of see the district maintenance facility. And some of this is all the existing building that was not taken down. This building was taken down. That's parking lot area now. So this is kind of the timeline for occupancy. Substantial completion was October 2019. And then the first VDOT occupancy, which actually was not the TOC, it was, they brought in a lot of those folks that were put out because their buildings were taken down. They brought them back into the building. And this is March of 2020 is an interesting date because they brought folks in. They started with the 3rd floor folks, they moved them in, and then they moved the 2nd floor folks in within a week or two after that. And then the pandemic kind of showed up and everyone was sent home. And the building was essentially, I don't want to say it was vacant. There were some folks that could not work from home for various reasons, but there were not many people on the 2nd and 3rd deck as a result of the pandemic. TSC operations were still operating out of the West 100 location. We did not get sent home. We continued with our operations during the course of the pandemic. TSC operations moved into the JSOC in August of 2020, and then State Police Division 1 moved in and occupied their end of the building, but also Division 1 Communications, the State Police dispatchers, they moved in November of 2020. I know I'm going a little fast. I tend to speak a little fast when I'm a little nervous. So if I need to slow down or there's other things that you want to explore, more than happy to accommodate. Here are some project benefits. Obviously, we've moved from a building that was built in the 50s into a brand new building, and really a beautiful building from the facilities that are available, but also just the look and the feel of the building. Improved coordination with the state police. We work literally side by side with the state police dispatchers, and there are times we have a relatively large video wall, and as crashes are occurring or have occurred and we see them on camera, we can splash them on the video wall, and we can have a conversation with state police dispatchers in terms of who they're sending, who we're sending, so that we can get the right folks to the right incident scene with the right equipment. So that coordination has been huge, and we were doing it before, but they were in Glen Allen, we were in Chesterfield, and everything was by phone or by some other technology tools. But being in the same room, sometimes it's just real easy to have a quick meeting and say, okay, we got the overturned tractor trailer, and here's what we're going to do about it. So real pleased with that. We're better able to integrate with our operations versus the other district functions. We're starting to yield some fruit on that. VDOT has just started coming back to work in this building on the second and third deck. Over the last month, more folks have been coming back to work here. So when we have issues that occur and we need some timing, signal timing folks, or we need some traffic engineer folks or some bridges and structure folks to look at an incident, we're able to reach out to them and they can come and look at the incident in real time and really understand what we need to do to facilitate safe, quick clearance of that incident scene. We have the ability to grow. This picture on the right is our server room. It's one room. It's partitioned into three areas. State Police has a part of the room that is not, segregated for VSP staff only. There's an area where services comes in, and then there's this, which is the VDOT servers. In the TOC itself, in that room where the TOC operators are working, there's no computers. All the computers are actually housed in the server room, as well as all the other VDOT technology resources. In this server room, we're poised for the future. When we go to when things start to ramp up with connected and automated vehicles, or we change some more our signal operations technologies, we are definitely poised for the future with regards to our servers and our server room. So this is calendar year 2020. These numbers are actually a little low because of the pandemic, but for that calendar year, this center, we managed just over 31,000 traffic incidents, and those could be anything from a disabled vehicle with a flat tire on the right shoulder to the overturned tractor trailer that we have the picture of here, and everything in between. We managed almost 27,000 work zones and 4,500 weather events with a relatively small staff. We normally keep 5 operators and a supervisor on shift during peak periods, and it tapers off a little bit during non-peak periods. So we have our work cut out for us, and we're pleased to be working in this state-of-the-art facility. And this is a picture of our room, and picture doesn't do it justice. This ceiling to this room is actually the ceiling to the second floor. It's a very large room. And on the left side are 9 VDOT workstations, and on the right side are 9 state police workstations, and then the video wall up front. And so that's kind of the cross collaboration. Dispatchers, here's a VDOT dispatcher, and there would be a VSP dispatcher sitting on the right. So are there any questions?
Any questions? I've got a question. How many different locations does VDOT have for cameras, fixed locations for cameras?
For cameras, we have 56 cameras right now. We're hopeful to get some more cameras in the near future. I know that they did the I-95 study last year, and I'm sure that we're going to get some more ITS devices out of that.
Have any mobile cameras that your VDOT crews can take to an incident so that the control room between VDOT and state police can get a better eye from a district perspective of what's going on with that incident?
We do not. We have 2 trailer mounted cameras. One was actually just relocated to the rest area on 64 at the 213 mile marker. We had one of our cameras damaged from a crash earlier this week, and the other one is on 64 as well. Those normally, they're not something that we can move immediately. Those typically take up to 24 hours to get moved and then put back into the system because they're all geolocated, and we have to have our ITS guys get them fed back into the system for 511 and Claris and that kind of stuff. I'm hopeful to get some more trailer mounted cameras. They are kind of a nice tool to have when something special or significant is going on. Those are a nice tool to have.
We do have one question from the internet. Nicole?
Yes, this question is from Emma Lancaster. Since Henrico is responsible for its roads, do they have a LNO or liaison officer at the facility? And if so, is the LNO present every day, or is it a collateral duty so he or she is present randomly?
Can you were a little broken in that transmission. Could you say that again?
Can you see the check question from Amber? And I can repeat it if you'd like. Since Henrico is responsible for its roads, do they have a LNO or liaison officer at the facility?
Oh, they do not. There are no counties that have any LNO representatives here.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for that in-depth overview of the Traffic Operations Center. We appreciate your being with us today, Ed. Keep up the good work.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Have a good day, sir.
You too. Bye-bye.
Next, we will have from Kelly Rowland a presentation on transit.
Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I am Kelly Nash Rowan. Some of you guys may know me. I was J. Kelly Nash, and I worked for the Intermodal Planning Office with the Secretary for several years. I see a few familiar faces, albeit a little blurry in the transmission, but I'm working with the City of Richmond and their new Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility. So I'm excited to be back in the planning scene and to be of service to Richmond residents. So Ken asked if I would talk a little bit today about some of the exciting outreach that we're doing for the update of the Richmond Connects plan. I'd like to say thank you all for having me. And I kind of wanted to start, instead of just jumping right into the tacos for transportation that I know you want to hear about, to start with a high level of what this outreach process is even for. So we are kicking off a policy guide that we're calling The Path to Equity, a policy guide for Richmond Connects. And as many of you know, Richmond Connects is the multimodal transportation plan for the city of Richmond. Plan has not been updated since 2013. So there have obviously been a lot of improvements since 2013. There's a lot of technological considerations, and just general planning landscape has changed a lot since 2013. We also feel like this planning effort will be fundamentally different than that 2013 plan, and that it has a primary focus on resolving some of the problematic inequities in transportation in the city of Richmond. The city has also updated its master plan since the last Richmond Connects update. So there is a great need to update the plan. This slide, I just wanted to kind of go over that. Right now, what we're working on is really the policy guide for the plan. We're going to look at a lot of the existing transportation policy that the city has developed, mostly through the master planning process, and continue with that emphasis on equity. This fall, we then plan to kick off the full Richmond Connects update. We're going to work on a shorter term mobility and accessibility action plan. That's going to be the existing conditions assessment, a multimodal needs assessment that will ultimately result in a priority recommendation list for those needs that were identified as the top needs. So it's really going to focus on a needs assessment. And that's really at the 5 to 10 year planning horizon. We do plan to look out at a longer range set of needs as well, and that will be more of a scenario planning exercise. I think Chet was saying that the team has some scenario planning, so I think that's going to be exciting, and it sounds like it'll overlap, and there'll be a lot of opportunity for collaboration. And that scenario planning exercise, rather than manipulating land use scenarios, you would manipulate different transportation investment scenarios and kind of say, if we invested largely in X, Y, or Z over the next 25 years, what sort of impact could we have to equity? Because again, the Richmond Connects and this policy guide is really going to be centered around equity. So in the policy guide that we're working on right now, we plan to pull the existing vision, goals, and objectives from the master plan. Sure, a lot of you helped contribute to that. It was a great effort. We talked about developing some new policy in that arena, and everyone said, we did such a good job with the master plan, let's just use that. So we plan to reiterate the vision, goals, and objectives from the master plan. But we do plan to take those goals and objectives and organize them into categories of transportation need and investment, just trying to provide a better linkage to those transportation need sort of areas so that we could directly link it to data a little bit easier. We also plan to, and kind of the big push of this outreach is develop what we're calling equity factors. So those are going to be kind of goal-like statements that are very targeted to the equity needs of Richmonders, and ultimately will help us shape an equity weighting framework that will help add extra priority to certain transportation needs as we do the needs assessment in the Richmond Connects plan. So this is just kind of check. We don't have to do any more on this. We've already done the vision, goals, and objectives. That will be reiterated. The needs categories process will really be more of an internal process. And the focus of the survey and outreach that I'm going to talk about today is really on developing these equity factors. So this is just a general outreach timeline for the policy guide. So we've been working since early spring to kind of lay out what our plan is going to be. We've worked through lots of different ideas, and we now are kind of in this phase where we have the survey is live, and we have 3 pop-up events planned. We've already done one that was on the 26th of June, and we have 2 more coming up to disseminate that survey. We also plan a couple webinars. You guys will get an email about the webinar and also our advisory committee probably next week. So be looking out for that. The webinar will be more geared towards kind of our traditionally engaged groups of people that are willing to jump on a webinar and listen to transportation planners talk. But the pop-up events are really focused on some of the traditionally underserved groups. We also plan to do some really targeted outreach with the survey. We have our city ambassadors through the Office of Community Wealth Building in Richmond. And they have iPads, and we've trained them, and they can, as we do more survey responses and figure out which groups are or are not responding, we can do some really targeted outreach with them and get them to do some door-to-door or some intercept surveys where they can go and stand at bus stops and stop people. We also plan to have a paper copy of the survey available, which we did at our events as well, but we plan to put those out in key locations in the city. We're trying to be really cognizant of the fact that not everybody has access to a computer or necessarily good data on their phone, or that they are trustful enough to do that on their device. So we're also offering a paper version of the survey. Like I said, the advice out for this group next week. Several of the TPO and county staff will be included on that. That's going to be kind of the traditional groups, the transportation planning professionals, but then we've also are inviting some of the advocacy groups that are at the forefront of some of these social justice movements and environmental justice movements, and asking them to come have a seat at the table, that if we're going to work on this together, that we need them to be on at the table as well. And then we also have hired, we sent out an application several months ago, a call for applications rather, for people that were interested in a paid ambassador position. So they're receiving a stipend to participate in our advisory committee. We went through the applications, and we have somebody that's representative of at least one person from every one of the city council districts, and several people that are, or we're having people that are representative of various different ethnicities, races, ages, incomes, family sizes. We're trying to be really all inclusive and just kind of have our citizen representatives. And again, this is a paid position, just recognizing that most of us get paid to sit in these meetings. We can't really ask everyday people to come and sit in a 4-hour meeting and expect to get their input for free. So this is going to be a paid position, which we're excited about. And all of this is really rooted in a lot of best practices research on equitable outreach. So then we also have our steering committee, which is what's in green. And they've been working all along. That's our internal City of Richmond group that represents the various city groups. But so we have a pretty robust outreach planned for this stage of Richmond Connects. The pop-up events. So that's what Ken originally asked me to talk about. So we are doing 3 tacos for transportation events. The purpose of these, we're really focusing it on the path to equity, the policy guide for Richmond Connects, but we also are just meeting people and introducing our office, because our office is new, the Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility in the city. So we feel like taking, something kind of fun, like a taco truck, out to the communities rather than asking them to come to us, especially people that are transportation challenged, is a good approach. We also feel, and like I said, in a lot of the best practices, that providing an incentive for people to spend their time doing something like a survey, and the survey is relatively long, so we feel like that is key to it being an equitable survey approach. The pop-up events, like I said, are really focused on getting survey responses. We have a team of the ambassadors that work with the Community Wealth Building Office that were at the event and will be at the future events. They have iPads. We also have paper surveys, and then we also have staff from our the Equitable Transit and Mobility Office. And the focus of that survey is really about understanding the past injustices that transportation and transportation investments may have had and how that's still affecting people's lives today. And then also a mapping exercise that's looking at barriers to access, which will be really interesting. I'd love to get with you, Rebecca, I think is your name, in the barriers to access for the mobility impaired. We'll have to see what kind of data that we get that people put in on those types of barriers to access. The other purpose of the pop-up events is just kind of the general purpose for any public engagement, any public meeting. We have basic requirements. We want to go above and beyond those, but meeting those general outcomes as well. We also feel like a lot of the communities that we're really interested in don't necessarily have a lot of trust or a lot of interest. There's a lot of traditionally underserved communities that we are taking these events to and sending street teams to get their feedback. And then again, just to make it a fun environment and bring people out that maybe wouldn't be interested normally, but they hear about tacos and they're willing to come have a conversation with us. The first event was a success already. And just engage meaningfully and create an environment where people want to stick around and chat. So the events that we have planned, we've partnered with some of the local radio stations. And we also have partnered with Community Clovia. I don't know if any of you listen to Kiss Radio or iPower in Richmond, but she is a community figure and she does special interviews with folks that are kind of working on things that will improve the city of Richmond. My boss, Divrana Clark, did a interview with her, and it aired a couple weekends ago, and then they'll air it again the weekend before our last event. And they've also been pumping the radio with advertisements for the events, and then there will be a live broadcast at the one this Saturday, and Community Clovia will be there. We also have really pushed the events via the Facebook page and digital advertising. So that's kind of been our advertising approach. The 26th event was done at Gilpin Court, or right next to Gilpin Court at the Calhoun Community Center. We met our goal. We had a couple hundred, close to 200 transportation surveys completed. And it was a really fun event. And I think we talked to a lot of people that would traditionally not have filled out a transportation survey. You can see some pictures. We had a 20 by 30, and this was part of a larger event called Gilpin Field Day. So there were a bunch of other city and state folks out there just tabling, and people that were doing our survey, then we would give them a little ticket and they could go over here to the taco truck and get free tacos. And you can see in this picture, this is some of our ambassadors that have the little vests on, that were helping people do the survey. You can see we had a tent and table so people could sit down and do it. And this is me, administering a survey, looking so official. And this is a couple of our other coworkers. But yeah, tacos for transportation. It's been really fun so far. So I just wanted to note that the survey, as it's live, and it's still live right now, and we plan to go till mid-August or the end of August, depending if we're meeting all of our outreach goals. So we're kind of tracking our participation as we go along. And if we aren't meeting certain groups, let's say we have very few people that are 65 and older. Well, we can send a street team to a senior center, or we're planning to do very targeted outreach to make sure that we are getting a representation from all of our interests in Richmond. And we've set ourselves some goals, like I said, to have not a statistically significant, but a representative sample. I think in our outreach guide, we say within plus or minus 10% of the distribution of ages, family sizes, income, races, ethnicities, and then locations as well. So we're trying to get a good sense of all of Richmond. So please come. Saturday, we have this upcoming Saturday from 11 to 3. We're going to have one of our events. The second one is at Bird Park. Will be set up over by the Fountain Lake. If you're familiar, there's like that little building right there by the lake. So we're going to be set up right by that because they have bathrooms in there. We'll have our taco truck, and then there also will be some Department of Health people, Office of Sustainability, I think planning, PDR, Planning and Development Review is also going to come. So it should be a good event. This is the link to our survey. People can do the survey ahead of time and come take a screenshot and come show us, or they can come do it at the event. And they can do it on their phone. They can do it on one of our iPads. They can do it in paper. If you have people that speak Spanish, we've got a Spanish version as well. And then our website is rva.gov/connects. So I thought I would pause here and see if I had any questions. I know that wasn't my full time, but I wanted to pause and see if there were questions, and if I still had time, I could go into a little bit more about what the survey asks.
Any questions of Kelly? Lisa?
Hi, Kelly. Just wondered how closely you're working with GRTC on this.
So this initial outreach part has really been an internal City of Richmond. We do plan on the advisory committee. GRTC will be represented, as well as all of our kind of, traditional planning partners. This part is really about talking to citizens about transportation inequities. Then we plan to take the input that we've got and then go talk to all of our other planning partners about, this is what we heard from the citizens, and now how do we make this make sense into some policy language that we can translate into metrics that will be used to help prioritize transportation needs.
It sounds like you're doing great work. It sounds similar, some of what you're doing, to a group in Houston, Texas. We've been talking to quite a bit about transit equities called Link Houston. You might want to check out their website.
I would love to.
So they started with a nonprofit startup group, and they've got a number of different indicators of equity.
I will check that out.
It would be interesting if some of your survey results might benefit Rebecca in her study in regards to first and last mile, because I'm sure a lot of the people that you're talking with and getting surveys from are involved in exactly that issue. So the two of you all need to get together on that.
For sure. And I was kind of saying that during the presentation. I was thinking when Rebecca was doing hers and she was talking about barriers to access, I was like, we have this whole part where people were really trying to focus on like those experiential barriers to access, like things like I can't get over this broken sidewalk, or, I don't feel safe because I have to go around into the street, or kind of the experiences of people. And I will say, just in our that first event, talking to some residents at Gilpin, I feel like the first 3 people that I talked to were all like, our seniors can't get, the sidewalk is crumbling, that, they might want to take the bus, but they can't get to it. And then they're a little bit confused because there's service changes. And, and this wasn't the senior saying it, this was younger people, but saying that's their biggest concern. So I will be interested to see once we get all the survey data put in. And I will say at the Gilpin event, we had more people, like 120 of the survey responses were the paper ones. People really wanted to do the paper one, which I thought was interesting because we had developed it in MetroQuest, and so it's way more interactive in MetroQuest, and to me way cooler. But I guess there's a little bit of trust issue with digital stuff. Or that's one thought that I had, or people just are tired of looking at their phones. Are in person and they wanted to do it on paper. But yeah, I would definitely like to go there, Becca. And we also, a side note, are working with OIPI, who I used to work for, on developing some accessibility metrics, and then like kind of like a pilot study on accessibility metrics, but then closing that loop on the like barriers to access, where areas that have high accessibility. So kind of like in Rebecca's study where it says, okay, 96% are within, a quarter mile from a bus stop, but we see very low utilization or lower utilization than we would expect. And then that pilot study is looking to develop metrics or ways to quantify, well, what are those barriers to access? So I think we definitely have some stuff to collaborate on.
Sounds like it, Kelly. Thank you so very much. Do appreciate the very interesting presentation and the work that you are doing. Keep up the good work.
Cool. And if you guys want, I think there's enough time. If people are interested, I can just do a quick walkthrough. I did some screenshots from the actual survey. I wasn't sure how many questions I would have, so I wanted to pause.
Well, unfortunately, we got some time constraints on this end, and we're having. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring you back once you've been able to tabulate those and work with Rebecca and give us. We'll give you a little bit more time the next time.
That's awesome. Yeah. So go, and if you're interested, go take this.
Will do. Thank you, ma'am. Have a good day.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Moving on, I have no particular comments, and Virginia, I know that you've got some. We'll save that for just a second. Okay, just a minute. Future meeting topics are on page 18. If you are interested, we will plan at least one workshop on funding sources. And like I say, there are some things that are big enough picture that we're going to, that I think we ought to spend the whole meeting drilling through that. But it's got to be full of content and interest at the same time. So we're in the process of pulling it back. Okay. Any comments from CTAC members? Nicole?
Yes, Amber has a comment or an announcement. Harriman Patterson is finally under construction. They removed the medians about 3 weeks ago, and construction is expected to last a year.
Thanks, Amber. Nice seeing you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I was with a great sad insight. The answer was that Bud Bye passed away, and I want to make sure all the CTAC members were aware there will be a memorial service for him on Sunday, July 25th at Trinity United Methodist Church on Forest Avenue, just south of Patterson Avenue. It will be at 2 p.m. and they're actually a little jazz combo afterwards. Everybody knows that Bud was a big jazz guy, so that'll be nice for people to attend. And for any of those of you who ride bikes, there's actually be a ride earlier in the morning. Go to RABA.org. We'll be an announcement there.
Can you get that out to all?
You send me that?
I will.
Okay. Thank you. He was a great guy, a big asset to this committee.
Indeed.
Sorely missed. Virginia, I know you're chomping at the bit.
Well, I just want to announce that this is probably my last meeting with CTAC. I'm going to be moving to Alexandria to a senior living facility there. And well, it's about time. I am 86, you know. So it's been a pleasure. There will be a new representative from the League of Women Voters. Ken, you might remember Sarah Wisica?
Sarah
Wisica, you know, she used to work for the T when it was the LPO, and she will be replacing me. So, but I was just watching this young woman and thinking that the TPO could take some lessons about outreach from her.
Yeah, we, so often we talk about, if you serve people food, they're more likely to show up. And if you make it enjoyable, they're more likely to participate.
Parfaits for planners?
Huh?
Parfaits for planners?
And for those of you in the viewing land, we were provided box lunches. And that's not a huge pocket puff, that's our cooking. So, if y'all want to take advantage of this and the chicken salad and all the other lunches, if that will encourage you to come in person, please do so. It's really great. Congratulations. I was going to say that they must have lowered the age limit in the senior center to allow you to participate, but you beat me to the punch. No way in the world we would have known that you were 86. So.
See if you can straighten out that Northern Virginia traffic for us.
And a lot of other issues in Northern Virginia.
I'm going to watch the building of the new Long Bridge.
There you go.
Thank you. Next meeting is September the 15th. I will hopefully be over the pond someplace at that point. So Vice Chairman Guthrie will be leading the meeting, which she has done in the past. Very, very.
I'm sure you can beam in to participate.
I don't think so. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Done. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes.